This is my city, my home. It might be your city, or like yours, where law-abiding citizens go about their business of working and providing good homes for their loved ones, and where destructive forces of crime and evil are also at work. In one way or another, we're all enmeshed by crime. We're either on the side of law and order or against it. We're all in the battle between good and evil.
Well, I guess we've got enough equipment, Inspector.
Imagine, Kennedy, 3 days and nights of perfect quiet, away from people, trouble, and crime.
Yes. Excellent fishing on a millionaire's private beach. You know, at times it's handy to know a man like Fleming Lewis.
Yeah, Fleming's a real guy. Never let his money go to his head.
The only thing that's really gone to his head is that pretty young actress he married after the first Mrs. Lewis died.
Yep, prettiest thing ever wrapped in mink. Even the minks admit it.
Oh, no.
Well, there he goes again. If he were assigned to interviewing girls, he'd be the best reporter in the business.
You're right, Inspector. Hey, Fleming's late.
Possibly adding up his millions. I'll give him a buzz. Any of you big-time gamblers want to bet a nickel on the first fish?
Make it a dime and I'll take it.
You're on. Hello, Fleming. This Walt. What's holding you up? Counting your money again?
Yes. Dorothy misplaced $1 million. She went shopping yesterday for a new hat. I guess that's where she lost it.
You have a careless wife. Okay, so you don't care how much she loses.
Hurry down, Fleming. I got a dime bet with Jameson on the first fish.
I'll take a nickel of it. Good. I'll pick up my fishing gear and be there in a jiffy.
Hello? Mr. Kennedy? This is Mrs. Fleming Lewis. I've got terrible news.
What? Don't touch a thing. We'll be right over.
What is it, Craig?
That was Mrs. Lewis. She says Fleming is dead.
Police baffled by mysterious circumstances surrounding crime. Just wait until that pencil pusher Jameson shows up. He thinks all we have to do is look at a body, point a finger at some person and say, I arrest you for the murder of Fleming Lewis. I'm busy, no calls.
But Inspector Jameson is here.
Oh, show Mr. Jameson right in.
Now, Inspector, take it easy.
Hi, Craig. Inspector. Anything new on Fleming?
You know all the answers. We're baffled.
The city desk changed my copy. I never wrote that you're baffled.
You didn't, huh?
No, one of the rewrite boys coined the graphic phrase.
Graphic?
Well, we don't know who killed Fleming or how it was done, do we?
I don't like...
I'm sure Walt wouldn't intentionally write down your department, Inspector, and so are you.
Yes, I guess I am at that. I'm just steamed up over this mess. 31 pieces of glass embedded in Fleming's body.
And not one of them went deep enough to cause death.
And no trace of the poison on the glass either.
But the coroner's report says that traces of an X-poison were found in his blood.
Sure, and it also says that Fleming didn't swallow the poison. So the glass must have something to do with how the poison got in the body.
But how?
Some form of explosive force must have driven it into the flesh.
See, bright boy? Now tell us how it was done.
How should I know? I don't solve the cases.
Yeah, I know. You write them.
If it was an explosion, there must be other pieces of glass in that room.
You're right. Scattered all over the place.
Mrs. Lewis is expecting us for questioning, isn't she?
Yeah, and the whole family will be there.
Everyone a suspect. I hope they haven't cleaned that room too thoroughly.
Me too. But after my boys got through with their pictures and dusting for fingerprints yesterday, I heard Mrs. Lewis give orders to clean up the place.
If I remember correctly, the butler suggested it.
You're right. I'll have to really question him.
Mind if I take this along?
Not at all. And when the case is closed, you can feed it to him. Baffled. I'll show you.
And I'll be the first one to print it.
You hope. I'll give the story to the other papers first. But tag along with us, scribbler.
Sure, you bet. I thought you barred me.
You're just on parole. I mean probation. Come on, let's get rolling.
Inspector, how about using one of your portable vacuum cleaners?
Sure, stick around. I'll get the right one myself. Then we'll let the baffle wonder lug it for us.
Oh, please, Inspector. I'll confess. I'll even say I put the baffle in the yarn.
You're still in the doghouse, Rover.
Well, now that Fleming's dead, Wallace Lewis will be president of the Lewis Chemical Company.
Yes, he's the largest stockholder now. Strange arrangement they have.
Closed corporation owned by the family, isn't it?
Yes, and it's agreed that when one dies, his or her shares are to be divided equally among the others.
Well, you and Burke won't have to go out of the family to solve this one.
Here you are. Hang on to it with both hands.
Hey, this ought to clean up the case.
Oh, no. Mrs. Lewis, we dislike questioning you at a time like this.
That's all right, Mr. Kennedy. How are you, Inspector? Walter?
Yeah, I'll take that, sir.
My orders are to hang on to it.
That will be all, Thomas.
Just a moment, Thomas. We'll have to question everyone, Mrs. Lewis.
Very well.
I fail to see what a butler can tell you. We have no skeletons in our closet.
You know Wallace Lewis, my husband's half-brother.
How do you do?
Hello?
Harvey Lewis, my dear husband's nephew.
So we have the police department, a criminologist, and a representative of the press with us. The first two will ask a lot of silly questions, and the third one will print everything we say in the newspapers. It's a fine thing to happen to this family.
Harvey, please. This is Norman Lewis, the other nephew.
Glad to know you, Mr. Kennedy. Inspector Burke, Mr. Jameson. Please be seated.
Thank you.
Sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Fleming spoke of you so often.
Norman and my husband were such great friends.
Oh, stop pretending. We're all under a cloud of suspicion. My brother was murdered.
That's right. We all benefit by his death. We might as well be frank about it, my dear kinfolk. The police have an uncanny way of finding out about your business, private or otherwise.
Unfortunately, our work does seem to be on the prying side. But a man's life has been taken, and the guilty person must be apprehended.
Shall we begin by establishing alibis?
That's one phase of the investigation we'll have to cover.
Well, you can start with me. I was in my office at the chemical plant all day. I can prove it. Never even went out to lunch. Dorothy notified me about 15 minutes after it happened.
And I was at the office. I drove over with Uncle Wallace. The same goes for Cousin Norman. However, Norman knew about it before we did. Dorothy phoned him first.
Yes, I did. His name just popped into my mind first, that's all.
And don't let a matter like that upset you.
Well, the alibi's all accounted for, except Dorothy. And Thomas.
Your attitude is uncalled for, Uncle Wallace.
Please, this is no way to act. As I told you, Mr. Kennedy, I came in here to see if Fleming was gone. You know the rest.
Yes, Mrs. Lewis. Thomas, can you add anything to what you said yesterday?
No, sir. I was in the hallway. I heard Madame scream, and I came in here at once.
Thank you.
Are you sure you didn't hear anything that sounded like an explosion?
Yes, I'm sure.
Explosion?
Yes.
What does he mean, Mr. Kennedy?
Your uncle's body was peppered with tiny bits of glass, propelled with sufficient force to tear through the clothing and penetrate the flesh.
Then the glass killed him.
No, not the glass. An unidentified poison.
And the glass business was just a bit of hocus pocus to hide the fact that the poison was swallowed.
We considered that. The poison wasn't swallowed.
Well, it's up to you and the police to solve this. I presume I may return to my office.
Just a moment, Mr. Lewis. You're the senior member of the firm now, aren't you?
I am. One half of Fleming's share is to go to Dorothy. The other half is to be divided between the three of us.
Which makes you the largest stockholder, Uncle Wallace, and the next candidate for murder. Unless, of course, the killer is satisfied with the present setup.
Are you implying that I murdered my brother to get control of the firm?
I'm not implying anything. But I do know you resented his superior position.
Why, you...
Just a moment, Mr. Lewis. That'll be all for now. We have some work to do in this room. Well, That covers all of the area where we might find glass particles.
One thing is certain, this room's never been so clean.
Yeah, from criminologist to house cleaner in one easy lesson.
We'll check this at the lab for the glass particles, Walt. As far as I can determine, Fleming, after using the phone, walked to this cabinet, opened the doors to get his fishing equipment. That's when he must have been killed.
Must have been a booby trap in the cabinet.
Yeah, some form of torpedo bomb, a glass ball.
But the only evidence we have so far are the glass particles from the coroner and what may be in this thing.
Yeah. You know, this room's too spotless for a routine house cleaning.
I agree, Inspector.
Oh,
Yes, Thomas?
I was just about to see you, sir.
Yes?
I was going to ask if it would be all right to go out for groceries.
Well, I don't see why not. By the way, did you empty the vacuum cleaner yesterday after using it in this room?
Yes, sir.
Where?
In the trash can out by the incinerator, sir.
Oh, well, I'd like to...
The trash was picked up this morning, sir.
I see.
Yes, sir. Anything else, sir?
No, you may go, Thomas. And, thank you for helping us.
Anything to catch the murderer of Mr. Lewis. He was a fine man.
You sure let him get away with that one.
Deliberately, Inspector.
Oh, I get it. Giving him enough rope to hang himself.
It's
huh?
been done before, Walt. Right now, I'm more interested in the contents of that bag. Shall we go?
You've got to get a hold of yourself, Dorothy.
I'll do my best, Norman, but I'm scared. Wallace and Harvey act so strangely toward me.
They've resented you ever since your marriage. I'll talk to...
What is it, Thomas?
Pardon, Mrs. Lewis. I was just going to tidy up.
Go right ahead.
I've got some things to do, Norman.
I'll see you later.
Oh, allow me, sir. Mr. Norman, I hate to mention such matters now, but,
How much this time?
oh, say 500?
500? I've already given you 3,000.
A paltry sum, sir, compared to the stakes you're playing for.
I haven't been able to get my hands on any large amount of money yet. You'll have to wait.
Don't be too firm, Mr. Norman. You must take care of me now.
Why the sudden pressure? This is your second demand since my uncle's murder.
Yes, I know. But we wouldn't want to go to the police with my information, would we?
Why, you...
While Mr. Fleming was alive, our secret was important enough. But now that a murder has been committed, my information is priceless.
This will have to last you until the estate is settled.
Yes, sir.
$500.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. What we know is still a deep secret. Oh, would you care for more coffee, sir?
Go on, beat it.
Yes, sir.
What is it, Craig?
The pieces of glass we picked up with the cleaner show traces of poison.
The X-type the coroner's report mentioned?
Yes,
But the glass taken from Fleming's body didn't show poison.
I know. But Scotland Yard had a case several years ago where the killer used a glass bomb filled with poison.
Go on.
The poison was absorbed in the victim's body.
Then poor Fleming was killed the same way?
Yes, Walt. Certainly points to a chemist, doesn't it?
Yes, but I still think the butler did it.
Could be.
He had every opportunity to get his hands on the firm's chemicals.
Walt, if the murderer tries for another victim in the family, we might have the solution.
Say, if you mean what I think, Fleming's murder was the first step to get full control of the Lewis Chemical Works.
Yes, Walt. And if Wallace isn't the killer, he's the next victim.
This is the kind of coincidence I don't like.
Yes, Walt. I wonder what's happened. That's a most unusual request, Mr. Lewis.
Is it unusual for a man to want to save his life?
Certainly not, but you'll have to go to Inspector Burke for such protection.
I demand to be placed in protective custody until you apprehend the murderer.
Have you any actual reason for fearing you'll be the next victim?
I've received no official notification, Walter. But common sense should tell you that I'm the next in line. Anyone who could concoct such a diabolical way to kill would stop at nothing.
Mr. Lewis, the research department at the plant is directly under your supervision, isn't it?
Yes. And if you're implying that I'm the logical one to have fashioned this whatever it was that killed my brother, Norman and Harvey work in that department too. Each is capable of being the killer.
But if Inspector Burke agrees to lock you up, what'll happen to the business?
Hang the business, Walter. I've got enough money. I want to live to enjoy it.
Walt, will you see if you can get Inspector Burke?
Yeah, sure.
Morning, Harvey.
Good morning, Cousin Norman.
Not going to the plant today?
You know, I'd worry about yourself. Don't ask me questions.
What's the matter with you?
So you've been giving Thomas large sums of money.
How'd you find out?
What's he holding over your head?
Did he tell you about it? Well, answer me.
Does Dorothy know about these payoffs?
Keep Dorothy out of this.
Have you two set a date yet? You know, it can't be too soon after Uncle Fleming's death. People might talk. And then what would the police... Now, don't you get excited. You see, I know what's going on.
That doesn't mean I had anything to do with Uncle Fleming's death. You could have done it. You're in love with Dorothy, too, but can't get to first base.
Hello, Kennedy. Had brunch yet?
The usual 4 cups of coffee. Sit down.
What's the matter with him? Sulking?
A person never knows when to speak to you anymore.
All right, you're forgiven for the baffling story.
How do you do, Inspector Burke?
How do you do?
This is interesting.
Uncle Wallace write you a fan letter, Inspector?
Mrs. Dorothy Lewis was stopped by a motorcycle officer at 2 o'clock this morning. She was driving 63 miles an hour in a 45-mile zone. When the officer stopped her, a man jumped out of the car and escaped in the dark.
Traffic sent that over to me. Thought I'd be interested. It says further that Mrs. Lewis refused to give the name of her auto companion. And give a box of good cigars know who the fellow was.
I'd like to have another talk with her.
As you say, Kennedy.
Did you give Uncle Wallace a nice, clean cell?
Yep, saw him this morning. He slept like a baby.
One thing for sure. He wasn't the one riding with Mrs. Lewis.
Did you show Wallace this traffic report?
Yeah. He said he always suspected she wasn't in love with Fleming. He has no idea who the auto companion could be, but he's willing to bet he'll turn out to be the killer.
You'll be wasting time trying to get anything out of Mrs. Lewis.
I don't mind the trip to her home. I want to talk to the butler anyway.
The butler?
Inspector, you're not the only one with tidbits of information.
All right. I give up. What is it?
I thought there might be a possibility of an old employee with a grudge. So I went out to the Lewis plant to look over the books and ask some questions.
And?
Out of 2,000 names, one stood out like a red lantern. A Mr. Woodward.
Was he fired?
No, he quit. He was a top chemist in the research department, and his first name is Thomas.
That ring a bell, Inspector?
Jumping catfish, ring a bell. I hear chimes. The butler.
Yes. The chemicals impaired his health, and he couldn't carry on with his work. Fleming took him into his home as a butler.
Sort of degrading for a top chemist.
What are we waiting for?
I hope we haven't disturbed you, Mrs. Lewis.
No, of course not. I wonder, though, what happened to Thomas the butler. I can't find him any place. He's disappeared.
Did he say he was going out?
No, he didn't say anything to me.
Mrs. Lewis, did you know that Thomas worked at the chemical plant 10 years ago?
No. Why do you ask?
The office records show that he was a top chemist before his health failed.
Oh, I see. Then Thomas could have killed my husband.
Yes, he could have. Mrs. Lewis, you were stopped by a motorcycle officer early this morning.
What of it? My personal affairs don't concern the police.
When murder's been committed, even your personal affairs are open to questioning. Who was with you?
All I can tell you is that he had nothing to do with Fleming's death.
We'll find out in time, Mrs. Lewis.
It seems you're all turning against me, even the family.
No, not at all. We want to help you, but you won't let us.
I just can't tell you, Mr. Kennedy.
Now get the name right. Thomas Woodward, a butler. Cover everything, even the morgue. And let me know the minute you learn something.
I wonder where an old coot like the butler would hide out.
If I could look into your limpid brown eyes to find out, I wouldn't send out that All Points broadcast.
Maybe you should lock up the whole family for protection.
That wouldn't solve our case, Walt.
Well, much as I hate to admit it, I'm baffled.
We could set up a bait, gentlemen.
How?
By using the power of the press.
Craig Kennedy, famous criminologist, divulged to this reporter that he'll break the Fleming Lewis mystery by tomorrow morning. This prediction is based on clues which will be cleared in his laboratory sometime tonight. There's your bait, Craig, but dangerous. What'll make the killer bite?
Fear, Walt. One of our greatest allies in apprehending criminals.
Now look, Craig, don't go overboard on the hero stuff.
I'll try not to.
I'm as nervous as a kitten in a bird store.
I don't know which way to jump either.
You know, I'm worried too. We're not dealing with an ordinary criminal. It'll be much easier for you if you stop struggling, Mrs. Lewis. What did you do with the cleaning woman?
You'll find her tied up in the basement.
Take your hands off her.
Norman, what are you doing here?
Evidently, he had the same idea you had.
That's right, Mr. Kennedy. Now get over here, Dorothy. I'll take care of them.
Norman, drop it!
Nice going, Inspector.
I'm glad your plan worked, Kennedy.
And I'm glad you're a good shot, Inspector.
Yeah, that's it. The man in the car with Mrs. Lewis was Norman. He made the glass bombs. Yeah, they thought they had a sweet setup to wipe out the rest of the family and take over the Lewis Chemical Company. Now, the butler? Yeah, he's in jail for blackmail. Yeah, he tried to make Mrs. Lewis and Norman pay off because they were in love. Did I cover everything, Craig?
I think so. What do you think, Inspector?
Well, at least he can't print that we're still baffled.
And so ends the case of Fleming Lewis.